All right, so ready for a deep dive into a story. It's got it all. Scandal, politics, media, you name it. We're talking Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Olivia Nuzzi.
This is juicy.
Right, and it's all because of some pretty wild reporting from the Daily Beast.
Yeah, and you know what really makes this one something else? It's not just any names involved here. We're talking to Kennedy. I mean, that's a political dynasty right there.
Yeah.
And then you've got Newsy, a journalist who everyone knows has some serious high-profile connections. This isn't just your run-of-the-mill gossip. This thing goes way deeper. It gets into power dynamics, journalistic ethics, the whole nine yards.
Exactly. Okay, so for anyone who hasn't been glued to their screens over this, let's give a quick rundown. The Daily Beast, they dropped this bombshell claiming RFK Jr., who, by the way, was very much married at the time, had an affair with Olivia Nuzzi. And here's the kicker. She was working on his profile for the magazine.
And that right there, that's where everything gets really messy. Think about it. You've got Kennedy, a political figure, been around the block, a name that carries some serious weight. And then on the other hand, you've got Newsy, crazy talented journalist, no doubt, but still, making her way in the world of political reporting, which can get, well, complicated.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, right? Don't dip your pen in the company ink. But in this case, it's not the office, it's the entire world of political journalism.
Exactly. And it's not even just the whole conflict of interest thing, which is already a big deal, of course. The Daily Beast, they took it a step further. They're alleging this wasn't just a fling. We're talking long calls, endless texts, and get ready for it, incredible FaceTime sex. At least that's what their sources are saying.
FaceTime 6. Okay, hold on. I have so many questions. But seriously, this is where technology just throws everything out the window, doesn't it? It's not just about, like, physical infidelity anymore. We're in a whole new dimension of intimacy here. And honestly, it kind of makes you think, what even are the rules in today's world?
It really does. And what's so fascinating is how this whole situation brings up so many questions, like how do we even define relationships when FaceTime's involved?
Yeah.
What are the professional boundaries for journalists, especially when they're covering people as powerful as Kennedy?
Right. And we can't forget the elephant in the room, the age difference. Nosi's 31, Kennedy's 70. Talk about adding another layer to those power dynamics we were talking about.
Exactly. It's huge. Age gaps like that, especially in these circles where access and influence are so intertwined, we got to look at them closely. It's all about understanding the potential for things to go wrong. Exploitation, power imbalances, how all of that affects people's judgment.
And we've seen this before, haven't we? Politics and journalism, they've always had this, well, let's just say complicated relationship. But now, throw technology into the mix, these new ways of communicating, and it feels like we're in completely uncharted territory.
It really does feel that way. Like we're constantly trying to catch up, figure out what's okay, what crosses the line. Because remember, this isn't some private matter. This is playing out in public, on the front page, and that's where reputations are made or broken.
And speaking of reputations going up in smoke, what about the fallout from all of this? Because let's be real, this wasn't just some quiet little rumor. This thing blew up.
Oh, absolutely. And it hit fast.
Yeah.
The Daily Beast, they said Nizzy was put on leave from New York Magazine. That's got to sting, especially for someone like her, on her way up and everything.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And get this, her fiancé at the time, Lizza, who's a pretty big deal in political journalism himself, he even stepped back from covering anything to do with Kennedy. Wild, right?
Wow. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. It's like everyone's scrambling for cover.
It really is, and it makes you wonder, where does Nuzzy go from here? Can she come back from this, career-wise, or is this going to follow her around forever?
I don't know. It's a tough one. On the one hand, you could argue what a journalist does in their personal life is their business, right? But at the same time, when it starts to overlap with your work, especially in such a public and, let's be honest, kind of sketchy way, it's not so easy to ignore.
Exactly. And it all comes back to accountability, doesn't it? Journalists, they're usually the ones holding everyone else's feet to the fire. So yeah, when they're the ones in the hot seat, people are going to pay attention.
For sure. Speaking of hot seats, what about Kennedy? I mean, the guy was running for president when this all went down. Talk about terrible timing.
Seriously, you couldn't script this stuff.
Right. So what does this mean for his political ambitions? Who knows? He was already a divisive figure, right? And this whole thing definitely didn't do him any favors. But then again, the guy's got some diehard supporters. They might not even care.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of wild how that works sometimes. But you know what I find interesting? This isn't just about whether they had an affair or not. It's bigger than that. It's about power, journalistic ethics, how we consume news in the age of social media, the whole shebang.
You said it. It's like a textbook case of how these worlds collide,
Yeah,
Politics, media, they've always had this power struggle going on, and then throw in technology, which
yeah,
changes the game completely.
right. Like we said before, it's not just a phone call or a face-to-face meeting anymore. It's FaceTime, texting, all of it. Totally different ballgame. And we're still trying to figure out the rules.
And it's not even just about them, the people involved, What about us? The people reading this stuff, watching it unfold. Are we so quick to jump on the scandal bandwagon that we forget to think critically, to consider the nuances of the situation? I don't know.
That's a good question. It really makes you think about what our role in all of this is, right? Are we demanding more from journalists? Or are we, maybe without even realizing it, contributing to this culture where nothing's off limits?
And how does that impact the kind of news we get? You know, if journalists are constantly looking over their shoulder, worried about getting caught up in some scandal, are they going to shy away from certain stories, certain sources? It's a slippery slope.
No doubt. It's like this whole thing opened up a can of worms. We're not just talking about one alleged affair anymore. We're talking about trust, accountability, the whole foundation of politics and media.
And honestly, it's a conversation we should have been having a long time ago.
I agree.
And it's not an easy one either. It takes a certain understanding, the pressures, the temptations, the constantly shifting landscape that both journalists and politicians have to navigate these days.
Because the lines are definitely blurred.
Big time.
It really is wild, isn't it? This whole thing, it's like accidentally stepping on a landmine, It's just boom, all these huge issues exploding everywhere.
Yeah, no kidding. You've got power dynamics, technology and relationships, the public's obsession with scandal. It's all a recipe for, well, this.
Right. And we eat it up every time. But you know what's really been sticking with me? This whole idea of access for coverage. The articles don't come right out and say it, but it feels like it's there, between the lines.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's something journalists deal with constantly, especially when it comes to politics.
Mm.
It's a real balancing act. You're trying to build these relationships with your sources, get the inside scoop, but you also have to keep enough distance to do your job objectively. Not always easy.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, was there some kind of unspoken agreement in this case? Even subconsciously, was there a sense that, hey, maybe this relationship could lead to more access, a juicier story?
I mean, it's definitely a possibility, right?
Yeah.
And it all circles back to those power dynamics we keep talking about.
Yeah.
Even if neither of them was consciously aware of it, that imbalance can really mess things up.
And what about us, the readers? Are we part of the problem? Think about it. Are we more likely to click on an article with a crazy headline, even if it means the reporting might be a little, shall we say, flexible?
It's a scary thought, isn't it? Have we, as a society, gotten so used to this blurring of lines that we don't even notice when someone crosses them? It makes you think.
It really does. And I'll be honest, I don't have all the answers. This whole deep dive into RFK Jr. and Olivia Nuzzi, it's really got me thinking about all of this in a new way.
As you should be. Because these aren't just random ideas. They have real consequences.
Yeah,
They affect how the news is made, how people see the world, everything. It matters.
absolutely. So as we wrap things up here, I think the biggest takeaway is this. The headlines might change, but the questions raised by this story, the ones about power, ethics, technology, all of it, those aren't going anywhere.
Nope, they're here to stay. And we better get used to talking about them, figuring them out if we want journalism to mean anything in the future.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. Next time you see a headline that's a little too good to be true, take a second. Ask yourself, who benefits from this, and what are we giving up to get this information? It's a small thing, but hey, you gotta start somewhere. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.